Hi wonderfully created, welcome back to Created I Am. In today's video I'm going to show you the tools you need to be able to draft a basic skirt pattern, the measurements you need to take, and I'm going to show you how to actually make the basic block. You can manipulate this block to make various skirts, but it will be a basic pencil skirt shape. In the next video I'm going to show you how to add allowance, how to cut out your piece and put it together with a basic zip. This video is different from the rest because it's jam-packed with information and tips and ideas as to why, not just what you need to do. So do make sure to utilize the timestamps in the description box to navigate this video and join the community in the comments so that you can share ideas. I was hoping to be posting weekly or every 2 weekly on Thursdays, but life is very busy, so right now I'm going to try and focus more on quality, putting out the type of videos I want to, so my uploads will not be as regular as 2 weekly, but you should be expecting stuff coming up. So first, let's start off with the tools you'll need. Of course, you'll need some paper. You want this to be large paper. I've got some old wrapping paper here, but you could use some gift wrapping paper, as long as you can draw on it. Second, you want a stiff ruler. This will help you when you're actually drawing your block. A French curved ruler would be useful for drawing curves, but it's not mandatory. But you will want a flexible measuring tape so you can measure yourself. Having a notepad and a pen will be useful for keeping and tracking your measurements, and then having a range of other pens to actually draw your block will be useful. One pen is fine. I have colours as well and pencils, so it's clearer on the video what's going on. You want some paper scissors to cut out your block, and some weights will be helpful. I just use ornaments lying around the house. If you have pins, that can also be helpful during the drafting stage, but everything else you'll need, such as a chalk and fabric scissors, material, etc., your sewing machine, will be useful later on when we actually use the block. It's part 2. It's time to take our measurements. Make sure you're wearing something that is comfortable and does not add much bulk. One key thing you want to keep in mind is that you don't want your measurements to be too tight. It should be your exact, and they shouldn't be too loose so you can fit your whole hand into the measuring tape. You also want to keep your measuring tape horizontal, not slanted. It should be parallel to the floor. I'm going to give you the overview of the measurements we're going to take and then talk specifically about each measurement and how to do it. We want to take our waist measurement, the smallest part, your hip measurement, your waist to your hip length, your waist to your knee length without bend, and your waist to your ankle length. You also want to take your bust to bust measurement. There are some other extra measurements I'll talk about when I go through the measurements in detail. Your waist is the smallest part of your belly. Take the measuring tape and wrap it all the way around, making sure the tape is horizontal. Use a mirror to help you, and then read it exactly. Now, if you know you like your skirts to be a bit snug, then pulling on this slightly may be okay, but it's better to take your exact measurements. Then, take your tape and push it down to the widest part of your butt, making sure it's also at the widest part of your hip when facing forward. Again, make sure the tape is parallel, measure it all the way around. Note down your measurement either in centimeters or inches or both if you prefer, and write it down. Then keep a finger at that point where you measured your hip and use that to then take the measuring tape and turn it upward vertically so you can measure the length from your hip to your waist. There is a classic standard measurement you can use, but might as well measure your own actual body. Next is your waist to your knee length. I kneel and then put to the top the 0 of the measuring tape on my knee, and then straighten up and find the measurement at my waist with the measuring tape hanging straight down. Using the same technique, take the measuring tape and put the 0 on the floor, and then straighten it up to your waist and note the measurement. Put it up slightly until it's at the ankle, about 2 inches or so off the ground depending on your body, and then again note down the measurement at your waist, and then pull the measuring tape up about halfway between your knee and your ankle, or wherever you prefer your 3/4 length, and then again note it from that point to your waist for your waist 3/4 length. These 3 measurements aren't needed, but taking the measurements now will help you manipulate the pattern piece more easily in the future. Next, you want to take your nipple to nipple measurement. The reason you're doing this is to know where to place your dart. There's different strategies about where to place your dart on your skirt. Some people just do it halfway through. The reason why I advise to use your nipple to nipple measurement is because it will match the dart measurements you use for bodice block measurements, where you use your nipple to measure your dart. On the screen, I'm going to show you the summary of the measurements you should have taken and the key ones that you need and where they will be placed on your skirt to create the shape needed. As mentioned before, you don't need to take those other 3 additional lengths, but they are just extras. One thing to keep in mind is that your zip needs to be longer than your waist to your hip length. You might get away with a 9-inch zip, but a 30cm or 12-inch zip might be a safer bet. My zips tend to be very long anyway, so I just cut them down and I'm normally okay. Next, I'm going to show you which measurements you need to divide by 4, which ones you need to divide by 2, and which ones stay the same. Your waist needs to be divided by 4 because we're only going to ever create a quarter, either half of the front or half of the back when we're doing the block. So that's why we divide the waist by 4. You're going to take your hip and also divide it by 4. Your waist to your hip measurement is not going to be divided because it's not actually being folded or cut at any point. Same as your waist to your knee, 3/4 or floor if you're using those measurements. But your nipple to nipple will be divided by 2. Making a note of this now before you actually start drafting will make things a bit easier. So write down your measurements raw and then write down the divisions and the manipulations you will actually use to draft the block, and it will make the process a lot easier. When you're dividing, if your measurement ends up being a decimal, please try and write that down accurately and measure it as accurately as you can. When you start rounding things at this stage, it can affect the final piece a lot. I've made these mistakes in the past, so please do take it from me. Part 3. It's time to actually draft our block. Take a piece of paper that is at least longer than your waist to your knee measurement and at least wider than half of your hip length. At this stage, we are not adding seam allowance, so you don't need that much cushion, but you should have a good 3 centimeters either side all the way around. Take your piece and fold it in half. When you fold it in half, the total length should be longer than your waist to your knee, and the width where you folded it should be at least wider than a quarter of your hip. I'm going to show you how to create a basic piece and then add seam allowance later once you cut out and separated the front and the back. By creating a fold, we're going to actually duplicate some of the measurements easily. Take your straight ruler and give yourself about 1 inch. I just drew it using the ruler, and draw a straight line. It needs to reach your fold. It should be decently long. Right now we're not being specific, so just a long line. If you want, draw it all the way through, but it definitely should reach your fold. Once that's done, you are now going to use your first measurement, which is your waist to your knee measurement. Now my ruler is not long enough, it ends at 60, so I had to take my flexible tape, lay it down flat, and then mark down my waist to knee measurement, starting at that black line I drew first. I did this at another point so that I made sure that my line that I drew was not wonky. Then I grabbed my normal ruler and used my points to create my baseline. Again, the length doesn't matter, just draw it all the way through. These are just guidelines for the top and the bottom of your skirt. Once you've done that, take your ruler and match it up to the top where your waist will be. And what you're going to do is you're going to measure your waist to your hip measurement. Mine was 70 centimeters, so I marked a few points along and then used my ruler to draw it all the way down to the fold. Again, no specific length at this point, they're just guidelines. I then marked on W for waist, H for hip, and K for knee. Take your ruler and take it up to the waistline. Take your waist measurement, which you should have divided by 4, and put it on your fold. Mark the end of that, which is your waist. What we need to do is add some extra measurements to this for the dart. So I've created a 3 centimeter dart. So whatever my waist measurement was, I'm going to add 3 centimeters to it. Later on, we're going to take off the dart and I'll show you how. But for now, let's mark our hip. After dividing your hip measurement by 4, add 1 centimeter to it, then mark it on. After dividing by 4, my hip measurement was 24 centimeters. I added 1 centimeters to get me to 25 centimeters. And then I put that on my fold and marked the 25 centimeters. The 1 centimeter gives you wiggle room for walking, running and sitting. You're also going to use this measurement to actually mark the bottom of your skirt at your knee. If you want your skirt to come in a little bit more, later I'm going to show you how much you can take it in to create a more fitted look. At this point, I added some of my measurements so I knew what I was doing as I went. If you want, you can do this right at the end or not even do it at all. I do advise you to do it at some point so that you know the measurements you use and it's easy to check if you've done the right thing. So it's time to measure our dart. Take your nipple to nipple measurement, which you should have divided by 2. Once you've found it, take that measurement and put it on your fold so you can mark the points that your nipple to nipple would be. Then you're going to take your ruler and line it up to your waistline and measure down 8 centimeters. If you want, you can play around with this. If you know you do have a very long waist to hip measurement, you might want to make this slightly longer. You want this dart length to be roughly half of what your waist to your hip measurement is. Let's say that your waist to your hip measurement is actually roughly 24 centimeters. You might want your dart depth to be around 11 centimeters. The reason we have the dart is because our body isn't fully flat, so we want to accommodate for the curves of our body without making it bulky. Once the depth of the dart is marked out, we need to mark out the width of the dart to create a triangle. To take off the 3 centimeters we added earlier, we need to half it. So half of the 3 centimeter dart is 1.5 centimeters. So I am going to measure 1.5 to the left and right of my dart marking. I do this by putting 1.5 on the actual dart mark and then marking 0 and then 3 to create my 3 centimeter dart. Once that's done, you've got those 2 anchor points. You can then take those points and slant the ruler to the end of the dart depth to then create your triangles. I'm using a different color so it stands out to me. So if you want to, you can just use your normal pen, but hopefully this is clear. We are going to make one more adjustment to the darts. But first, we want to curve the waist. Right now, it's very straight and perpendicular, but that doesn't match the way the skirt should sit on your waist. We need to integrate a curve. You can do this later, but if you want a pattern block that accommodates for the main things, it's better to do it now. Take your ruler and take it to the fold at the top at the waist. You're going to add 0.5 centimeters, half a centimeter's height, to the point you marked as the top of your waist. You are then going to take your ruler all the way to the edge of your waist, including that extra 3 centimeters we added, and then mark on 1.5 centimeters. You're then going to bring over your French ruler and draw a curve. When using the French ruler, one thing you want to keep in mind is the line at the fold needs to sit nicely on the fold. It should not be slanted or else it's too misplaced. It should still be pretty straight, so when you cut it, you don't have any weird spikes in the middle of your skirt. Once you've gotten that anchored on and you find that the top also matches the point you marked, you can then draw a curve. If you don't have a French ruler, don't worry, you can freehand it. As you can see, at this point I use my border coloured pen because this is going to be our final waistline. So you can do that as well at this point, or leave it to the end, or just use a normal pen. Now we can go back and actually finish our dart. You're going to extend your 3 lines up to this new waistline, and then you're going to extend the middle of your dart upward. Making sure your ruler is lined up, you're going to extend the line 1 centimeter. So I just drew mine from 9 to 10, extending it 1 centimeter. Then you're going to connect the top of that to the corner wings of your dart. The reason you do this is because we've created that curve with that bold black line at the waist. That will mean that your dart may not reach that curve when you actually cut it out, and hence you can't pin down your dart later. By drawing this triangle at the top, it will allow your material to all clip in together and sew well together when you actually add a waistband. Now it's time to curve out the hips. Take your ruler and put it at the edge of your waist. When I say that, I mean the edge of that black bold line, and then match it up with the hip point you marked earlier. Draw a faint line from the point of your waist to the point of your hip. Because this was not one of my main lines, I just used a pencil at this point. Once you've drawn that straight line matching those 2 points, you want to roughly find the midpoint. My measurement was roughly 20 centimeters, so I marked the halfway at 10 centimeters. The reason you're going to do this is because we need to curve that area. So take your ruler and match it up to that midpoint and elevate it about 1 centimeter. The reason we're lifting it up 1 centimeter is to help guide the curve. We don't want the curve to be too much or too little. My tip is that if you are a size 6, 8 or 10, you use 0.5 centimeters at this point. I later went to reduce this measurement. If you're a size 10, 12 or 14, you might want to use 1 centimeter. And if you're a size greater than that, you probably still want to maintain 1 centimeter. When you then sew your piece, it's better to do it with a material you don't mind experimenting with to find out what actually works for you. I want my ruler to run through those 3 key points for it to work. If you have too much of a curve, what happens is you get that buckling effect where your material is not matching your waist, so you can see the excess material. That's why it's important to have it. If your curve is not curved enough, then it will be very tight at that point and you'll struggle putting on and off or zipping up your skirt. Once that is done, we can focus on the bottom of our skirt. Take your straight ruler and match it from the hip to the bottom of your material and draw a line going all the way through. This should be sufficient to create a pencil skirt, but if you know that you like your skirt to go in a little bit more, then you're going to take it in at this point and various other points that I will show you on the back of the skirt as well. From this edge point, you can take it in 2 centimeters as a general guideline of how to taper it in. You might want to take a bit more, but max I would say 4 centimeters. And if you're going that much in, you're definitely going to need a split. So if you do not want to sew a split, then make sure you do not taper it in a lot, or better still, just leave it at the original. I take my ruler and match it at my hip and then line it up to the hip measurement at my knee. I then take my red pen and create a broken line from my hip to the inward measurement to taper in the skirt. Now you can have both these measurements and later on when you're sewing just fold in the excess along that dotted line to create a more tapered look. So you can draft both on now and then use both later based on what you prefer. And that's it. We've now drafted the front of your skirt. At this point, I also marked on that it is a fold just to remind me not to cut out this line from the material. You might also want to write down in the empty space your waist to ankle, floor and 3/4 length measurements on the front so you know later on when you create other pieces. Also mark down other adjustments that you've made, and then once you've done with that, you can cut it out. I don't know what's going on with my tutorials, but it seems like I always miss out or lose the clips where I cut out the pieces. Now, we've created a fold, so when I'm cutting, I'm just making sure I'm cutting the folds together so that the front and the back piece are cut at the same time. Once you've done that, you should have something that looks like this. We can then use this to draft the back. So you don't have to remeasure everything. Take a needle and punch through the key points. I punched through the bottom of my dart, which shows the depth of it. I also punched through the points of the dart that were on the original faint line. So you can see here, this is not the bold part because that's obvious. It's the part just in the first faint line we did. I put a hole through those 3 points so they're more obvious. You can see me twisting around the needle so that the hole is obvious when I turn the piece around. I also put a puncher through the waist original before I added the excess for the dart. It's just useful to know where your original waist was, again later for manipulation. It's not actually going to affect things when you cut out your material. I also put the other points, even though I'm not using them because of the curve, just so I visually know where things were originally if I do need to make adjustments later. Once you've done those dart and then waist holes, you should be fine. Open up your piece and then transfer over the lines. I took my ruler and matched it up to my hip line and then made sure it was straight before drawing a line all the way through. Do the same thing for the original starting waistline and extend it. Then find the holes that you punched through before and make them more obvious by doing bigger points. At the top draft initial waistline, you should have 5 points in total. You can join up these points at this point, but instead I'm going to show you where the back is slightly different. Your back is slightly different in terms of the curve we use. Because of the way your butt works, your skirt is more likely to pull down at the back, causing there to be a gaping To reduce that caping, the curve is going to be more accentuated, curvier at the back. So instead of taking the excess up from that initial faint black line, we're actually going to take it down. Find the original faint line that we put, the horizontal line for the waist, and match up your ruler to it. Take it down 1 centimeter. Then use that 1 centimeter to put on your French ruler. Remember, you don't want the line on your French ruler to be tilted. You want it to match the straight up of your fold. Then once that's done and your French ruler is nice and straight on the fold, you're then going to make sure that that point to the left edge of your waist is matched up. So you want to go from 1 centimeter down all the way back to the original end of the waist on the left that we did before. Take your time matching this up. Once that's done and your ruler is looking good, you can then go from the edge of your waist, which is the same as the front, but this time take it down 1 centimeter at the middle of your waist. Make sure you stop at the fold, because beyond that would be the front, and right now we're focusing on the back of your waist. You can see here that I've drawn that curve in a bold black line because it will be the final curve for the top of the waist for the back. Now that that's done, it's time to do the dart. The dart is the other place that differentiates the back pattern piece from the front. Your dart is actually going to be longer at the back to accommodate for the curvier bootay. So use the middle of your dart holes to align your ruler, and then draw a line, but this time instead of ending at the 8 centimeter point, draw it further down to 10 centimeters. So in general, add roughly 2 centimeters more onto your original depth. So it's time to now do the left and the right of my dart. I'm going to use the left and the right points to match up my ruler. So here you can see it matched up to the left, but I'm actually not going to start at that little point. I'm going to start at the black bold line, which is my waist for the back. Then I'm going to match up the right dot to the bottom of my dart where it ends at 10 centimeters down. But instead of drawing it from the actual point, I'm going to draw it from the back of my back waist. It just makes it look neater, so you can cut things out a bit easier. Then I'm going to use the top of this to finish the top triangle part of my dart. So as you can see here, we didn't add any extra on the top because the extra was created by the original points I put on. So I don't need to actually extend this anymore. Once that's done, we can write down the key features. It's just the fact that this is the back, where the zip should go, the fact that at this line it won't be a fold, it will classically be a cut, so you can insert a zip. Then you can go and talk about the indentations you will use for a more fitted skirt. At the back, there's actually 2 places you can indent it in. You can indent it on the side, so you would take it in 2 centimeters like you did at the front, but you can also take it in at the middle, at the cut, at the center. My tip is to only use this point if you're doing a very fitted fishtail style dress. The more you take it in, the deeper the split you will need. So if you just want a bit of tapering without being too worried about the split, I would say maximum 2 centimeters at the sides alone. Anything more than that, please keep in mind it might not fit and you'll need quite a deep split. Once that's done, you can go and put on your dotted dashed lines matching up your indentations to your hip. Notice that the ruler goes straight to my hip. I'm not creating any other curves. It's nice and straight. That's the same for the middle, and here you can see why it starts getting dangerous when you taper in your skirt way too much, because you're really starting to take in that material around the widest part of your body at your hip. But if you do want to do that, you might want to start about 2 centimeters below like I am. I've not gone exactly to the hip, and then do your dashed lines down to your indentation. Once that is done, we can put a line down the middle just so it's visually clear where our front and the back pieces separate. Just before we cut that out, I just want to highlight some things that we've adjusted at the back. One of the things we did is that we took down the curve more so it's deeper, and the reason is to remove excess material that will flap or buckle at the back when you put on your skirt. We also extended the dart so it was deeper, and the reason why we did that is because your bum is curvier than your front classically. Because we have a center split that will be cut, we also gave room for an indentation at the middle, unlike the front. And these are the major differences between the front and the back part of your block. So now it's time to separate the two pieces and make sure that the back actually shows those differences. Take your paper scissors and cut down the center fold or that bold back line that you've drawn to make it clearer. Then go to the top of your back waist and cut along the bold lines. I'm cutting along the black line and then taking my scissors up to create the triangle of my dart, then back down to dip down the waist just a little bit more. If you liked that tutorial, if you found it informative, if you found it helpful, click the like button, subscribe, and definitely turn on your notification bell so that you know when I post the next video showing you how to add allowance, giving you more advice about how to use these pattern pieces properly and how to actually sew the skirt with a zip. If you actually would prefer for the measuring, the pattern piece, the cutting, the sewing, the allowance all in one video, even if it's an hour plus video, if you'd find that useful, let me know in the comments. At the end of the day, I'm making these to help people on their sewing journey as I learn and as I go. If you have any other tips as well, please pop them into the comments. I won't know everything and I don't mind navigating you guys towards videos and tutorials I think are helpful. But please do let me know your feedback. Make sure to turn on that notification bell because like I said, life has been very busy, but I still want to try and put out quality. And to do that, I can't post every 2 weekly right now. So you need that notification bell. You need to flag to YouTube. You want to see my videos so you see when the next one is up. And of course, most importantly, you need to remember that you are, that's right, wonderfully created.